Well, on the line of certainty, if I'm certain about anything, it's that I've restarted this podcast 5 times because I'm uncertain about exactly what I want to say. But lately been listening to Malcolm Gladwell's Revenge of the Tipping Point, which I really enjoy. And I've enjoyed most of his books, probably some different feelings and opinions about him out there, which is good. And his motivations aside, I generally think his approach, attempts to do something that I think is just really interesting and cool, is try to add some humility to the hubris of human certainty. And the reason I like this approach is because, I'm a big believer in that you just don't know. And honestly, you can just push through the journey. You can have conviction. You can run toward an end state. But the adventure would be way less fun if we knew the destination and what was there and how we were going to get there, at least in my opinion. As I said before, that would probably drive a lot of people crazy. And I do think it's so interesting how certain we get on certain topics, on specific topics, without a lot of validating information. I think, humans, we only need a couple specific instances for something to confirm a belief, and then we extrapolate that, to the rest of the world. But in order for us to disbelieve something, man, it takes a lot of negating evidence to the contrary. And I just have always thought this was something really interesting, and I think it's interesting for a handful of reasons. One, I think it's interesting because there are different scenarios where this matters more or it matters less. And I think also there are times when, certainty, even when it turns out to be wrong, is still probably better than a lack of movement because of uncertainty. I think there are a lot of occasions where it's almost better just to take the leap, take the jump. I mean, that's kind of what got me doing this podcast. I felt I don't know how to get it right. I don't know where it goes. I don't know if anyone cares, but I wanted to do it. I'm going to take the step forward. And then, I think if I had waited longer and longer than I already had, it never would have got to where we are. Definitely emergency situations where certainty and just taking an action can be much better than waiting. But then I think there are lots of scenarios where we're too accustomed to believing our worldview as is and not even considering other information on how it could be different. So that's one reason I think this is interesting. The other reason I think this is really interesting, and this is because Gladwell, in one of his earlier books that I really like, Talking to Strangers, looks into what is it like to, how do you analyze, our ability to judge character? Because so many of us feel like we're great judges of character. And I don't feel like I'm a good judge of character, but I'm willing to learn about people's character and try and take in as much data as I can. And sometimes you don't have the luxury for that kind of time. But anyway, in his analysis, you come to find out that it seems like we're not really good judges of character. And for some of us that think we are good judges of character, it's simply because we've just had a small, sample size of people who validated our worldview. And either we haven't uncovered the dirt or we haven't had, enough negative instances of that. So I think that's an interesting one. The other thing he talks about, which I really like, and I think it's interesting for this topic because there is not quite a paradox, but it seems like it almost runs contrary to everything I'm saying here, is, Gladwell talks about the world would grind to a halt if we were always second guessing each other and second guessing, ourselves when it comes to certainty. So I don't know. I think that's, I just think that's really interesting thing to consider as you go through your day. I do think it's really good to be open to new information, but I can also see how tedious that is. And that's something I think one of the reasons a lot of us get stuck in a particular view, and this kind of goes back to the habit forming piece, is that it's just where's the time to do all that other stuff, to take in all that extra information? Again, it's I'm just going to go with what is easy and right in front of me. And that has to be right because it's worked so far. Sometimes you need to be slapped out of that. it's just fun to think about. It's also fun for me to think about because most of the time like I said, I like just seeing where it all goes. So, when you sit down and get really nerdy about it, I think that's kind of interesting. And, when do you think about this kind of stuff? A long time ago when I was working at Reebok, bit of a throwback, which was a fantastic era of life. One of the, he was actually my boss for a while. This guy, Chad Whitman, he was practicing Christian. And one of the things he shared with me was he would do this thing during workouts called active prayer. And I don't remember all of the pieces of it, but basically utilizing a workout as a time to focus on maybe a specific prayer or some specific verse. And I always thought this was really interesting. And I hadn't thought about this in a long time until I was talking to my buddy the other night about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he said one of the things he really liked about it is it kind of just clears his head and pushes away everything else, because he felt like, and I've heard a lot of other people say this, that he needed to be focused just on the jits, just on the Jiu-Jitsu. Because as soon as he got distracted, the entire strategy and manipulation of the opponent or person just became infinitely harder, and small slip-ups escalate quickly. And when he had mentioned that got me thinking about this active prayer thing. Because one of the things I'll do in workouts a lot is kind of focus on it. Use the workout as like a vehicle to push most everything out, but maybe focus on like a single thought or an idea. A lot of workouts, I won't say they feel like autopilot, but at this point, with like the number of workouts that I've done, there's kind of like a routine. I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with all the movements, got a lot of reps under my belt. So I definitely use it as a time to kind of like just focus on like a single topic. Like, what am I going to eat for dinner? Should I have cheese on my sandwich? That kind of stuff. No, sometimes deeper thoughts, but I really like it because the intensity and the physical exertion of the workout kind of push out just enough clutter, or I can have some like almost like flow state clarity over those single thoughts if I really think about them. I feel like I do really good thinking during exercise, unless it's like a really, really short, intense workout. But even then, you have nice little moments of clarity. So that was a cool little throwback to Chad and something he had shared with me. Have not talked to him in a while. Wonder what he's up to. But cool dude. Hell of a really, really, really good athlete. That was it. Short one today. A lot of different thoughts, but the thought about certainty was the main focus. I'm always curious to think about how people, how do others intake their information and vet it? Do they even care? And what do they do with it? So more tomorrow.